Midnight draped the city in a shroud of silence, broken only by the faint patter of rain against the glass doors of the office building, where I sat a lone security guard in a uniform that felt more like a costume than a shield. The world outside was a void, empty of life, yet something stirred in the darkness, a presence I couldn't see but could feel like a predator circling just beyond the light. That night, I learned a truth that still haunts me. Some doors once opened can never be closed. The job was a strange one, a temporary gig I'd stumbled into a few years back. I wasn't qualified. Nobody seemed to care about that. The building, a towering maze of offices and shops in the heart of downtown, buzzed with life during the day. People streamed through its halls, their footsteps echoing off polished floors, their voices a constant hum. But at night, it transformed. The lights dimmed, the corridors fell silent, and the world outside vanished behind locked glass doors. My role was simple. Sit at the front desk, watch the emptiness, and call the cops if anything went wrong. It was easy money. I'd spend hours scrolling through my phone, lost in games or videos, the glow of the screen, my only company. Sometimes I'd pace the lobby, my boots clicking against the tiles, counting steps to break the monotony. The job didn't demand much, and I didn't mind. It was part-time, a way to pay the bills without taxing my soul. But that night, that night, something shifted. The air felt heavier, charged with an unease I couldn't name. It was past midnight, the city long surrendered to sleep. The rain had started a soft drizzle that streaked the glass doors like tears. I was at my desk, half lost in a video, when a sound cut through the silence, a sharp, deliberate knock. My heart lurched. Nobody comes here at night. The building was sealed a fortress against the outside world. I froze my thumb, hovering over the screen, waiting for the sound to repeat. It did louder this time, insistent. I stood my chair, scraping against the floor, and peered toward the entrance. The glass doors loomed ahead, reflecting the dim lobby lights, but beyond them, the street was a blur of shadows and rain. I approached slowly, my pulse quickening with each step. Through the glass, I saw her, a young woman, maybe in her 20s, standing alone in the cold. Her hair clung to her face, wet and matted, and her jacket was too thin for the weather. She looked fragile, desperate, her hands cupped against the glass as she motioned for me to open the door. "Let me in." Her gestures seemed to plead. I hesitated. The rules were clear. No one enters after hours. no exceptions. But she looked harmless, shivering in the rain, her eyes wide with something that might have been fear or something else. I shook my head, mouthing through the glass, "We're closed." She frowned, shaking her head, pointing to her ear as if she couldn't hear me. "Open the door." She signaled again, her movements urgent. Against my better judgment, I cracked the door open, just enough to speak. The cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet asphalt and something faintly metallic. The building's off limits. I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "There's a place down the street that's open. You can use their restroom." She stared at me, her expression unreadable, then spoke in a low, trembling voice. "I'm so cold. Please, I just need to warm up for a minute." Her words tugged at me, but the rules held firm in my mind. I shook my head again, pointing toward the open building a block away. She lingered for a moment, her gaze locked on mine, then nodded slowly and turned away, disappearing into the rain-soaked night. I shut the door, the lock clicking into place, and returned to my desk, my heart still racing. That was it, I told myself. Just a weird moment. It's over, but it wasn't. 20 minutes later, the knocking came again, sharper, more demanding. I jolted upright, my phone slipping from my hand. Her again, I thought, irritation mixing with unease. I crossed the lobby, my boots echoing in the empty space, and peered through the glass. This time, it wasn't her. A man stood there, his face shadowed by a hooded sweater, the fabric dark and heavy with rain. He knocked again, raising a hand to wave me over. Something about him set my nerves on edge, the way he stood, too still, too deliberate. But I'd handled the woman fine, hadn't I? I could handle this. Without thinking, I opened the door a crack, ready to repeat my spiel. The building's closed. The door exploded inward, slamming into me with a force that stole my breath. The man surged forward, his shoulder driving the glass into my chest. I stumbled, my legs buckling, and hit the floor hard. Pain shot through my ribs, but there was no time to process it. Another figure loomed above me. A second man, his boots stepping over my sprawled form as if I were nothing. My mind screamed, "Run!" I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline flooding my veins, and bolted for the door they'd just forced open. The cold air hit me like a slap as I stumbled onto the sidewalk, my uniform clinging to my skin in the rain. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My legs carried me down the street, my breath ragged, until I was far enough to feel the illusion of safety. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. 2 men broke into the building. I gasped, my voice barely coherent. "I'm the security guard. They're still inside." The operator's calm questions grounded me, but my eyes kept darting to the shadows, half expecting those men to emerge, their silhouettes hunting me through the rain. I paced the sidewalk, the cold seeping into my bones, my mind replaying the moment I'd opened the door. Why did I do that? The woman's face flashed in my memory, her trembling voice, her desperate eyes. Had she been part of it? A lure to test my resolve. Minutes later, the wail of sirens pierced the night. 3 police cars screeched to a stop, their lights painting the street in red and blue. 5 officers spilled out their voices, sharp and authoritative. 2 stayed with me, asking questions I barely registered, while the others stormed the building, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. I stood there, shivering. My uniform soaked my mind, a tangle of fear and guilt. What were they after? The building held nothing obvious. No cash, no valuables, just empty offices and silent hallways. Yet they'd come prepared, coordinated, ruthless. The officers returned their radios, crackling with updates. "We got them," one said, his voice clipped. 2 males still inside. They didn't get far. Relief flooded me, but it was tainted by dread. What about the woman? I asked, my voice hoarse. The one who came earlier. The officer's eyes narrowed, and he spoke into his radio. Minutes later, they had her too. She'd been waiting in a car nearby, the getaway driver, her frail act a lie to soften me up. The truth sank in like a blade. I'd been played from the start. They'd counted on my inexperience, my hesitation, my humanity. I went back to work the next night. But the job felt different. The lobby, once a place of boredom, now seemed alive with threats. Every shadow, a potential intruder. Every sound, a warning. I quit a week later, unable to shake the feeling that I'd crossed an invisible line. That night had stripped away my illusions, leaving me raw and exposed. I still see the woman's face, sometimes her eyes pleading through the glass, and I wonder if she knew what was coming. I still hear the door slamming into me, the weight of my mistake. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. But there's another memory, one I rarely share. A week before that night, I'd been at a bar with a friend, laughing over drinks, when a stranger approached. He was older, his face lined with scars, his voice low and deliberate. "You work nights, don't you?" He'd said, his eyes glinting in the dim light. I'd laughed it off, thinking he was just making conversation. But his next words chilled me. "Be careful who you let in." I'd forgotten about him until after the break-in, when his warning echoed in my mind. Had he known something? Had he seen something in me? A weakness, a naivety that others could exploit? I'll never know. But I carry his words with me, a reminder that the world is full of doors, and not all of them lead to safety. The rain still falls in my dreams, each drop a knock on a door I can't bring myself to open. The building is gone now, torn down to make way for condos, but its shadow lingers. I walk past that street, sometimes my eyes drawn to where the glass doors once stood, and I feel it again. The weight of that night, the moment I let the darkness in. You can lock every door guard, every gate, but some threats find a way through. And when they do, they leave you changed forever, wondering what lies on the other side. It wasn't the sound that woke me that first night. It was the silence that followed. The kind of silence that clings to your skin heavy, like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I'd just moved into the apartment, a tired old place with peeling paint and creaky floors. But it was mine. A fresh start or so, I thought. The clock glowed 11:00 p.m., and the world outside was dead. No cars, no voices, just the faint hum of the city sleeping. Then it came. A knock. Not a tap, not a mistake, but a deliberate, bone-rattling thud against my front door. My heart lurched. Who'd be here in this crumbling building at this hour? I froze, staring at the door, waiting for another sound. A voice, anything. But there was only that suffocating silence, pressing harder, now daring me to move. I dragged myself off the couch, my bare feet cold against the warped wood floor. The apartment was small, just a living room, a bedroom, and a bathroom, all connected by a narrow hallway that seemed to swallow light. I reached the door, my hand trembling as it hovered over the knob. I pressed my eye to the peephole. The glass warped and smudged, distorting the hallway outside. Empty. Not a shadow, not a flicker, just the dim yellow glow of a single bulb flickering in the corridor. I told myself it was nothing, a neighbor's mistake, a kid playing a prank. But the air felt wrong, like it was thicker, charged with something I couldn't name. I backed away, my pulse hammering in my throat, and crawled into bed, pulling the blanket over my head like a child. Sleep came, but it was thin, fractured, haunted by the echo of that knock. The next night, it happened again. Not at 11:00, but closer to midnight, when the world felt even more abandoned. This time, the knock was louder, angrier, like it demanded to be heard. I was awake, sprawled on the couch, scrolling through my phone to drown out the loneliness of the new place. The sound hit like a fist, 3 sharp blows that made the door frame shudder. I dropped my phone, the screen clattering against the coffee table. My breath caught, shallow and ragged, as I stared at the door. It wasn't a mistake anymore. Someone was out there, someone who wanted me to know they were there. I forced myself to stand my legs unsteady and crept to the peephole again. The hallway was empty, just like before, but the light flickered faster, now strobing in a way that made my stomach twist. I pressed my ear to the door, holding my breath, listening for footsteps, a whisper, anything, nothing. Just that same oppressive silence wrapping around me like a noose. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the door until dawn painted the room gray. The knocks came again the next night, and the night after that. Always late, always different times. 10 Hailuo, 11:30, midnight. Each time I checked the peephole, and each time the hallway was a void. I started to wonder if I was losing it. Maybe the stress of the move, the isolation, was carving cracks in my mind. But the knocks were real. I felt them in my bones, each one a violation, a reminder that something was watching, waiting. I stopped unpacking boxes, stopped leaving the apartment unless I had to. The world outside felt safer in daylight, but at night, this place was a cage, and I was trapped with whatever was out there. On the 4th night, it wasn't the door. It was the wall. I was in the room dark, except for the faint glow of my phone. I'd been trying to distract myself, watching videos, anything to keep my mind off the knocks. Then it came a thud, deep and deliberate, from the wall behind my head. Not the door this time, but the wall that separated my bedroom from the apartment next door. I bolted upright, my heart slamming against my ribs. The sound wasn't an accident, not a pipe or a neighbor's furniture. It was the same rhythm, the same weight as the door knocks, but closer, intimate, like it was inches from my skull. I clutched the blanket, my breath hitching, as another thud followed slower taunting. They know where I sleep. I slid out of bed, my feet hitting the cold floor, and pressed my ear to the wall. The plaster was cool against my cheek, but I heard nothing now, just my own pulse roaring in my ears. I waited frozen for what felt like hours. No more knocks, but the air in the room had changed thick with a presence I couldn't see. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The thought of someone or something on the other side of that wall, knowing exactly where I was, made my skin crawl. I kept imagining a hand reaching through the plaster fingers, curling around my throat. When morning came, I stumbled out of the apartment, desperate for answers. As I passed the door next to mine, the last unit at the end of the hallway, I stopped. It was open, just a crack, the darkness inside spilling out like ink. My stomach dropped. I wanted to look to see what was in there, but every instinct screamed to run. I hurried past, my heart pounding, and didn't look back. That day, I met her. A woman, maybe in her 60s, with kind eyes and a slow, deliberate walk. She was in the hallway, heading toward the stairs, her arms full of grocery bags. I seized the chance, my voice shaky as I introduced myself. She smiled, said she'd lived here for nearly a decade, and welcomed me to the building. I hesitated, then asked about the apartment next to mine. Her smile faded, just for a moment, before she answered. That place. It's been empty for months. No one lives there. My blood ran cold, empty. Then who was knocking on my wall? Who was opening that door? I told her about the knocks. The door, the wall, my words tumbling out in a rush. She listened, her face tightening, and suggested I report it to management. She hadn't heard anything like it, she said, but her voice carried a weight, like she knew this building held secrets. I went back to my apartment, the woman's words looping in my mind. Empty. The word felt like a lie, a cover for something darker. I stood in my bedroom, staring at the wall, imagining the vacant apartment on the other side. No furniture, no life, just shadows. And that door open, just enough to invite something in. I reported it to management that afternoon, sending an email with every detail: the knocks, the wall, the open door. They responded quickly, promising to investigate, but it felt hollow, like they were humoring me. That night, the knocks came again, harder, more insistent, as if whoever was out there knew I was fighting back. I didn't check the peephole this time. I didn't trust what I'd see. The fifth night broke me. I was in bed, the room pitch black, when the knock came from the wall again. Not one, but three, each one slower, heavier, like a heartbeat slowing down. I sat up, my chest tight, and stared at the wall. The air was wrong, heavy, like it was pressing me down. Then, a sound, a faint scrape, like nails dragging across plaster, coming from the other side. They're trying to get through. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called management, left a frantic voicemail, begging them to do something. The scraping stopped, but the silence was worse, alive with intent. I didn't sleep. I sat against the far wall, as far from that cursed wall as I could get, until the sun rose. The next day, there were no knocks, no sounds, no open doors. It was too quiet, like the building was holding its breath. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it all, that the stress had warped my mind. But then management called. Their voice was clipped professional, but I caught the unease beneath it. We checked the cameras. Someone was in that apartment. They've been dealt with. Dealt with who, how? They wouldn't say only that the knocking should stop. And it did. The next night was silent, and the night after that. The door to the vacant apartment was locked, the hallway light steady. But the relief was thin, fragile. I kept seeing that open door in my mind, the darkness spilling out. I kept hearing those knocks, not in the walls anymore, but in my dreams. Years later, I moved out, but the apartment never left me. I can still feel the weight of that silence, the way it clung to me, waiting for the next knock. I never learned who was in that apartment, what they wanted, or why they chose me. But I know they were there, watching, waiting, their presence seeping through the walls. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake up certain I hear it again, a faint thud just beyond the edge of sleep. And I wonder if they're still out there in some other building, some other life, knocking, waiting for someone to answer. The phone didn't ring. It screamed. A shrill, jagged sound that sliced through the silence of my apartment at 11:03 p.m., yanking me from the haze of my late-night work. I sat frozen at my desk, the glow of my computer screen casting long shadows across the guest room I'd turned into an office. My headset felt heavier than usual, like it was tethering me to something I didn't want to face. I told myself it was just another customer, another routine call. But deep down in that primal part of my gut that knows things before my brain catches up, I felt it. Something was wrong. Terribly, horribly wrong. I worked as a customer service representative, a night gig I did from home to save up money. From 8:00 p.m. to midnight, I sat in this cramped room answering calls for a faceless company, helping people with their mundane issues, billing disputes, technical glitches, the usual. Most nights were quiet, with long stretches of downtime where I'd scroll through my phone or stare at the peeling paint on the walls. The guest room was sparse, a desk, a chair, a single window with blinds that never quite closed right, letting slivers of street light bleed in. It was my sanctuary, my bubble. Until that night, when the bubble burst, I pressed the button on my headset, forcing a professional tone. "Hello, Thank you for calling. How can I assist you? Silence. Not the kind of silence you get when someone's distracted or fumbling with their phone. This was thick, deliberate, like the quiet before a predator strikes. I repeated, "Hello." My voice wavered, betraying the unease creeping up my spine. Then a voice answered, low, gravelly, like it was scraped from the bottom of a well. "I'm outside your apartment." My heart stopped. Not slowed, stopped. The words didn't just register. They clawed into me, each syllable a needle under my skin. I laughed, a nervous reflex, because what else could I do? "Come again," I said, hoping I'd misheard, praying this was a prank. "I'm right outside," the man said, slower this time, as if savoring my reaction. "I can see you." The room tilted. My eyes darted to the window, but I didn't dare move. The blinds were half open, and beyond them, the night was a void, black, impenetrable. Could he really see me? Was he out there, hidden in the shadows of the parking lot, watching my silhouette against the monitor's glow? I forced another laugh, brittle and fake. "Is this a prank? Who is this?" He didn't answer. Instead, he laughed a sound that wasn't human. It was too sharp, too jagged, like glass breaking in slow motion. It burrowed into my skull, echoing long after it stopped. I ripped the headset off my hands, trembling, and stared at the phone. The call was still active, the timer ticking. I slammed the end button, my breath ragged, and sat there, waiting for my pulse to slow. "It's just a prank," I told myself. Some bored idiot messing with me. I'd dealt with weird callers before, drunk ones, angry ones, even the occasional creep who thought heavy breathing was funny. But this was different. This wasn't a game. This felt personal. I tried to focus on work, but my eyes kept flicking to the window. The street light outside flickered, casting jagged shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking. I stood my legs unsteady and crept to the blinds. My fingers hovered over the slats, afraid to touch them, afraid to confirm what my gut already knew. I parted them just enough to peek out. The parking lot was empty, the asphalt glistening under the drizzle. No cars, no people. Just the wind rustling the trees like a whispered threat. Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. I turned back to my desk, and that's when it happened. A knock. Not a tap, not a mistake. A deliberate, heavy thud against my front door. My knees buckled. I grabbed the edge of the desk, my nails digging into the wood. No way. The call was a prank, but this was real. Another knock, louder this time, like whoever was out there wanted me to know they weren't leaving. My apartment was on the second floor, accessible only by a narrow staircase. No one could just pass by. Whoever was knocking had climbed those steps, had chosen my door. I stood frozen, my mind racing. Should I ignore it? Call someone? Check the peephole? Every option felt like a trap. I crept toward the door, each step agonizingly slow. The floorboards creaked under my weight, louder than I'd ever noticed, like the house itself was betraying me. The knocking stopped, but that only made it worse. Silence was louder, heavier, filled with possibilities I didn't want to imagine. I reached the door, my hand hovering over the peephole. My reflection stared back, pale and wide-eyed, distorted in the brass. I leaned forward, holding my breath, and looked. Nothing. The hallway was empty, the fluorescent light buzzing faintly. I exhaled, my legs trembling, but before I could step back, the phone rang again. Not my work phone, my personal cell sitting on the desk across the room. The ringtone was a cheerful jingle, but in that moment, it was a scream. I stumbled back to the desk, my eyes locked on the screen. Unknown number. I knew it was him. I don't know how, but I knew. My thumb hovered over the answer button, every instinct screaming not to pick up. But what if I didn't? What if he was still out there, waiting? I pressed answer and brought the phone to my ear. My voice barely a whisper. Who is this? That laugh again. Sharper, closer, like he was standing right behind me. Why didn't you open the door? He said. His voice was different now, taunting, almost playful, but laced with something darker, something that made my skin crawl. Who are you? I demanded, my voice cracking. What do you want? He didn't answer, just laughed, then hung up. The silence that followed was worse than the call. I stood there, clutching the phone, my eyes darting between the door and the window. Was he still out there? Had he ever been out there? My mind spiraled, replaying his words, his laugh, the knocks. I needed to do something, anything, to break the paralysis. I dialed 911, my fingers fumbling over the screen. The operator's voice was calm, clinical, a lifeline in the chaos. I stammered through what had happened. The call, the knocks, the man who claimed he could see me. She told me an officer was on the way and to stay on the line. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and backed into a corner, my eyes never leaving the door. While I waited, I tried to ground myself. I focused on the hum of the refrigerator, the drip of the faucet, the faint buzz of the street light outside. But every sound was a threat now. Every shadow a figure waiting to step into the light. I thought about my old job, the one I'd worked during the day, surrounded by people, noise, safety. Why had I taken this night gig? Why had I thought I could handle being alone in this apartment night after night, with nothing but a headset and a locked door between me and the world? When I was a kid, I used to hide under my bed during thunderstorms, convinced the lightning would find me. My mom would sit on the floor, her hand reaching under to hold mine, telling me stories about brave knights who faced dragons. Fear is just a shadow, she'd say, and shadows can't hurt you. But this wasn't a shadow. This was real. And it was here, and no story could make it go away. The police arrived 20 minutes later, an eternity compressed into seconds. I heard the officer's boots on the stairs, heavy and deliberate, and I unlocked the door only after he identified himself. He was older, grizzled, with eyes that had seen too much. I told him everything, my words tumbling over each other, and he listened, jotting notes. He searched the building, the parking lot, the stairwell. Nothing. No signs of anyone. No footprints. No cameras catching a figure in the dark. He was here, I insisted, my voice shaking. I heard him. He knocked. The officer nodded, but I could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe me. Not fully. Could have been a prank, he said. Kids, maybe. Or someone got the wrong apartment. He handed me his card, told me to call if anything else happened, and left. I locked the door behind him, sliding the deadbolt with a force that echoed in the quiet. I didn't go back to work that night. I turned off the computer, unplugged the headset, and sat on my couch, a kitchen knife in my lap, watching the door until dawn. The calls stopped after that. No more unknown numbers. No more knocks. No more voices claiming to see me. But the fear didn't stop. It lingered a stain on every quiet moment, every shadow that moved in the corner of my eye. I quit the job a month later. I couldn't handle the nights anymore, the way every ring of the phone made my heart lurch. I moved to a new apartment, one with better locks, better lights, a security system. I checked obsessively. But even now, years later, I can't shake it. The memory of that voice, that laugh, the knocks that came too close. I don't know who he was or why he chose me. Maybe he was just a stranger with a sick sense of humor. Maybe he was something else, something that thrives in the dark, in the spaces we think are safe. Every night, I check the locks. I close the blinds. I listen to the silence, waiting for it to break. And sometimes, in the quiet, I swear, I hear it, a faint, jagged laugh just beyond the line. The road stretched before me like a wound in the earth, its edges bleeding into the endless dark of the plains. At 3 Hailuo a.m., the storm screamed, tearing at my father's car with claws of rain and hail. I thought I was alone, driving through a world abandoned by light. But something was out there, watching, waiting its presence stitched into the fabric of the night. That drive home became a descent into a reality I still can't explain. The night began innocently enough. Curled up on my girlfriend's couch, the flicker of a horror movie casting shadows across her living room. Her parents' rules were strict. No overnight stays. No matter how late we lost ourselves in laughter or whispered secrets. So at 2:30 a.m., I kissed her goodnight, grabbed my jacket, and stepped into the storm. The air was thick with moisture, the kind that clings to your skin and seeps into your bones. My dad's car, an old sedan he'd lent me, grudgingly sat in her driveway, its paint dulled by years of sun and neglect. I climbed in the leather seats, cold against my thighs, and started the engine, its rumble barely audible over the howl of the wind. Normally, I'd take the main highway home, a 25-mile stretch of predictable asphalt lined with gas stations and the occasional late-night diner. But the storm changed everything. The rain came in sheets, slashing across the windshield, and the wind rocked the car like a cradle in a nightmare. I couldn't face the long route, not with visibility near zero, and my nerves, already frayed from the movie's lingering dread. So I chose the shortcut, a narrow back road that cut through the plains, a ribbon of pavement flanked by fields that seemed to stretch into infinity. I'd driven it before, but never at night, never in a storm like this. Just get home, I told myself, gripping the wheel. Stay focused. The road was a mistake from the start. The few street lights flickered, then died, plunging me into a darkness so complete it felt alive. My headlights carved weak tunnels through the rain, but the water smeared the windshield, turning the world into a blur of gray and black. The wipers thrashed uselessly, their rhythm a frantic heartbeat against the storm's roar. Then the hail started. Small at first, like gravel, pinging off the hood. Then heavier, each impact a jolt that made me wince. I imagined my dad's face, his lecture about the car's pristine condition, echoing in my head. Panic crept in, tightening my chest. I couldn't see the road's edges, couldn't tell if I was veering into the ditch. Slow down, my mind screamed. Stop. I pulled over the tires, crunching against the gravel shoulder, and killed the engine. The storm's fury enveloped me, the car shaking as hail battered its roof. I sat there, my breath fogging the air, trying to calm the tremor in my hands. The plains stretched out on both sides, invisible but vast, their emptiness a weight pressing against the windows. I felt small, exposed, a speck in a world that didn't care. Then, through the haze of rain, I saw it, a faint, bobbing light in the distance, like a firefly caught in the storm. A flashlight. My stomach twisted. Who would be out here in this nowhere at this hour? I cracked the window, the cold air stinging my face, and leaned out, squinting through the hail. The light grew closer, its beam cutting erratic arcs across the field. A figure emerged, tall and lean, moving with a purpose that felt wrong. At first, I thought he was a farmer, maybe checking a fence or a stranded animal. But as he approached, his height became unnerving. Too tall, his limbs stretched in a way that defied normal proportions. "Lock the doors," a voice in my head urged. I slammed the window shut, my fingers fumbling for the lock button, the clicks barely audible over the storm. The man stopped a few yards from the car, his flashlight sweeping over the hood, the beam blinding me for a moment. I shielded my eyes, my heart hammering, and caught a glimpse of his face. He was smiling. Not a friendly smile, not a reassuring one, but a grin that stretched too wide, too sharp, like a mask carved from bone. His lips moved, mumbling words. The storm swallowed, but his eyes, God, his eyes, locked onto mine, unblinking, as if he could see through me, into me. I pressed myself against the seat, my breath shallow, every instinct screaming to flee. "Don't move," I told myself. "He'll go away." Then headlights flared in my rearview mirror. Another car, its approach slow but steady, crawled along the road behind me. Relief surged through me. Someone else, a lifeline. I glanced back at the man, expecting him to retreat, but he was gone. The flashlight's beam vanished, the field empty, as if he'd never been there. I blinked, my mind reeling. Where did he go? The plains offered no cover, no trees or ditches close enough to hide in. The other car passed its taillights a beacon, and I started the engine, following it, like a lost child, desperate for the main road. The rain eased as I reached the highway, but the ice on the pavement forced me to crawl each turn, a test of nerve. My phone had no signal, its screen a useless glow in the cup holder. The memory of that man's smile clung to me a splinter in my thoughts. I tried to focus on the road, on the hum of the engine, but a shape loomed ahead, a black dog, its fur slick with rain, standing motionless in my path. I swerved, the tires squealing, and braked hard, my chest heaving. I hit it. I must have. I stepped out the cold, biting my skin, and searched the road behind me. Nothing. No blood, no fur, no sign of a dog. The emptiness mocked me. The plain's silent, except for the drip of water from the car. I climbed back, in my hands shaking, and gunned the engine, the need to be home overwhelming. The road stretched on the plains, a blur of shadow and mist. A strange compulsion pulled at me, an urge to look out the window, to scan the fields. I resisted at first, keeping my eyes fixed ahead, but the feeling grew insistent, like a voice whispering at the edge of my mind. Look. I glanced out, expecting nothing, but there he was, the tall man standing far out in the field, his white shirt glowing faintly in the dark, his flashlight waving frantically, as if calling me back. I screamed, the sound raw in my throat, and floored the gas, the car lurching forward. I didn't look again. Home was a blur of relief and dread. I locked the doors, checked the windows, and sat on my bed, the storm's echoes still ringing in my ears. The man's smile, the dog's absence, the flashlight's dance. They haunted me, each memory, a question without an answer. Was it real? I'd driven that road 100 times since in daylight, in calm weather, and seen nothing but fields and sky. But that night, something else was there. Something that knew me and wanted me to see it too. There's a story my grandfather told me years before that night about the plains and the things that linger there. He was a farmer, his hands rough from decades of toil, his eyes sharp with secrets. The fields aren't empty, he'd said, his voice low, as we sat by a fire. They hold memories, things that don't die. Sometimes they walk. I'd laughed a kid's dismissal of an old man's tale, but his words stayed with me, buried deep. That night, they surfaced sharp and cold, as I wondered if I'd met one of those walkers, a thing that wore a man's shape, but wasn't human, a thing that smiled to hide what it truly was. I don't drive that road anymore. The highway's longer, but it's safe. Its lights a promise of normalcy. Yet sometimes, when the rain falls and the night grows heavy, I feel that urge again, that pull to look out into the dark. And I wonder if he's still out there, waiting in the fields, his flashlight cutting through the storm, his smile a trap for the next soul to pass by. Some roads lead home, others lead to places you can never leave. The rain didn't just fall that night. It clawed at the world, tearing through the silence of my rural home, like it wanted to drown it. I'd driven 30 minutes through the storm, my work uniform soaked my bones, aching from a long shift that stretched past dusk. My house sat alone, tucked away in a quiet corner of town, surrounded by fields and shadows. The driveway was a mess of mud churned up by the downpour, and as my headlights swept across it, something caught my eye. Tracks. Not mine. Deep, fresh tire marks carved into the earth, leading to my doorstep and back out again. My stomach twisted. Someone had been here. I pulled up to the house. The engine's hum swallowed by the rain's relentless roar. No mail, no packages, nothing to explain those tracks. I told myself it was nothing. A lost delivery driver, a neighbor's mistake. But the marks were too deliberate, too close, like someone had lingered, watched, then turned back. I stepped inside, the air heavy with the scent of wet wood, and something else, something faint, like earth, disturbed. My boots left streaks on the tile, but I kicked them off, eager to shed the day. The living room was dim lit only by the glow of the TV I'd left on its muted chatter, a feeble shield against the storm. I sank onto the couch, scrolling through my phone, trying to ignore the unease creeping up my spine. But the house didn't feel like mine anymore. It was maybe an hour later when I heard it. A sound soft but unmistakable, cutting through the rain's steady drone. A tap at the front door. Not loud, not urgent, but sharp enough to make my head snap up. I froze my thumb, hovering over my phone screen, my breath shallow. The TV flickered, casting jagged shadows across the walls. I waited, straining to hear it again, hoping it was just the storm playing tricks. But the silence that followed was worse, thick, deliberate, like it was hiding something. I stood my legs unsteady and crossed the house to the front door. The porch light was off the glass panel in the door, revealing nothing but darkness and rain. I flipped the light on, expecting to see a neighbor, a stray animal, anything. Nothing. Just the empty porch, slick with water, and the endless curtain of rain beyond. I locked the door, double-checked it, and turned back to the living room. My heart was still racing, but I brushed it off. It's just the rain, just the wind. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, settled back on the couch, and turned up the TV to drown out the storm. But as I sat there, something felt wrong. The air was too still, too heavy, like the house was holding its breath. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting another tap, but none came. Instead, my eyes caught something else. On the white tile floor, just behind the couch, was a mark. A smudge of mud, small but distinct, shaped like the edge of a boot. My breath caught. I hadn't worn my boots inside. I'd taken them off at the door. Someone else had been here. I grabbed a rag from the kitchen, my hands shaking as I wiped the mark away. It was gone, but the sight of it burned in my mind, a violation I couldn't erase. I stood there, staring at the spot, my pulse hammering in my throat. The mud wasn't mine. It couldn't be. I'd been careful, obsessive, even about keeping the house clean after days like this. I checked the door again, the windows, every lock, all secure. But the house felt different now, like it was watching me, its walls hiding secrets. I tried to focus on the TV, on the mindless sitcom playing, but my eyes kept darting to the corners of the room, to the hallway leading to the stairs. What if they're still here? I remembered a story my co-worker told me years ago about a break-in at his place. He'd come home to find a single glass on his counter, one he hadn't used, filled with water. No one was there. Nothing was stolen. But he never felt safe again. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I shook it off, telling myself I was paranoid that the mud was a fluke. But the unease clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake. I decided to head upstairs to my bedroom, where the walls felt safer, closer. The couch faced the TV, leaving the hole downstairs behind me, exposed, vulnerable. I couldn't stay there, not with that mark in my mind, not with the house feeling so wrong. Upstairs, my bedroom was a sanctuary, or at least it used to be. The bed was backed against a wall, the door in clear view, a small TV on the dresser, casting a soft glow. I locked the door behind me, a habit from living alone, and sank onto the bed. The rain was louder here, hammering the roof, but it was comforting, a reminder of the world outside. I turned on the TV, flipped to a random channel, and tried to lose myself in it. For a while, it worked. The mud, the tracks, the tap at the door, they faded, pushed to the back of my mind. I was almost relaxed, almost myself again, when it happened. A thud, muted heavy from somewhere outside the bedroom door. I sat up, my heart lurching. The TV droned on, oblivious, but the air in the room had changed, charged with something dark. I muted the sound, straining to hear. Nothing. Just the rain, the wind, the creak of the house settling. I told myself it was nothing, just the storm, but my body didn't believe it. My hands were clammy, my breath shallow. I crept to the door, pressed my ear against it, and listened. Silence, but not the kind that soothes. It was alive, waiting like it knew I was listening. I stood there, frozen, debating whether to open the door. Every instinct screamed no, but I had to know. I had to be sure. I turned the knob inch by inch and peeked into the hallway. Empty, dark. The spare room door at the end was closed just as I'd left it. I exhaled, my shoulders sagging, but the relief was fragile, ready to shatter. I was halfway back to the bed when it happened. The TV downstairs roared to life. Not a glitch, not a quiet hum, but a deafening blast of sound, the sitcom I'd been watching now, screaming through the house. My heart stopped. I hadn't touched the remote. I hadn't even been downstairs in hours. The noise filled every corner, bouncing off the walls, drowning out the rain. I stumbled to the stairs, my legs barely holding me, and peered down into the living room. The TV's light flickered across the walls, casting wild shadows, but the room was empty. No one was there. I gripped the banister, my mind racing. Someone turned it on. Someone's in the house. I crept downstairs, my bare feet silent on the carpet, every step a battle against the terror clawing at my chest. The living room was just as I'd left it. Couch, coffee table, TV blaring. I scanned the room, my eyes darting to the corners, the hallway, the kitchen beyond. Nothing. No movement, no sound, except the TV's relentless noise. I reached behind the set, my hand trembling, and pressed the power button. The screen went black, the silence rushing back like a tidal wave. But it wasn't empty silence. It was heavy, watchful, like eyes boring into my back. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen, its weight cold and reassuring in my hand, and started checking the house. Every door, every window, every closet. The locks were secure, the windows intact. But the air felt wrong, like it was tainted, like someone had been here, breathing the same space. I was upstairs again, checking the spare room, when I saw it. The door was closed, but something caught my eye. A faint glint on the floor, just inside. I pushed the door open, my knife raised, and stepped inside. The room was bare, just a desk, a chair, and a few boxes I hadn't unpacked. But there by the closet was the TV remote. Not the one from my bedroom, but the one from downstairs. The one that controlled the TV that had just screamed to life. My blood ran cold. They were here. They're still here. I backed out, my heart pounding so hard it hurt, and sprinted downstairs. I didn't think, didn't wait. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and ran out the front door, the rain soaking me instantly. I called the police from the driveway, my voice shaking as I told them everything. The tracks, the mud, the TV, the remote. The police arrived 20 minutes later, their flashlights cutting through the storm. I stood in the rain, shivering, watching them search the house. They found it a broken lock on a downstairs window, hidden behind a curtain. Someone had been inside, maybe all night, moving through my home, watching me. The tire tracks matched a car that had been there earlier, they said, but whoever it was had slipped out when the TV went off, using the noise to cover their escape. Nothing was stolen. No clear motive, just the chilling certainty that I hadn't been alone. They were there all night, inches away, silent as shadows. I never felt safe in that house again. I moved out a month later, but the memory clings to me, a weight I can't shake. I still see those tire tracks in my mind, the mud on the floor, the remote in the wrong room. I still hear the TV's sudden scream, the silence that followed. Sometimes when I'm alone at night, I feel it, that prickle on my neck, that sense of eyes watching from the dark. And I wonder if they're still out there, waiting for another house, another life to invade, their footsteps silent, their presence a trespass I'll never forget. The rain didn't fall. It attacked, hammering my windshield like 1,000 fists, each drop a reminder of how alone I was on this God-forsaken road. It was 2:17 a.m., and the storm had turned the world into a blur of black and gray, my headlights barely cutting through the deluge. I was an Uber driver, chasing pickups in the dead of night. And tonight, the app had sent me to a pinpoint in the middle of nowhere, 25 minutes from civilization, surrounded by empty fields and skeletal trees. My gut churned as I drove, a nagging voice whispering that this ride was wrong, that I should turn back. But the promise of a fare, however small, kept my foot on the gas. Then in the rearview mirror, I saw him, a shadow, stepping from the void, his face hidden by the storm, his presence a wound in the night. I'd been an Uber driver for 2 years, working nights to make ends meet. Most shifts were uneventful: drunk college kids, tired workers, the occasional tourist. But stormy nights like this were different. The world felt smaller, meaner, like it was holding its breath. I'd spent the first hour parked in an empty lot, the rain drumming on my roof. My phone propped on the dash, playing old music videos to keep me sane. No pickups, no people, just me and the storm. When the app pinged with a request, I hesitated. The location was a corner of 2 rural roads, 25 minutes out, with a drop-off another 20 minutes deeper into the nowhere. No other drivers were around, probably smart enough to stay home. But I wasn't. I accepted the ride, telling myself it was just another job. The drive felt endless. The road was a ribbon of asphalt, unlit and treacherous, flanked by fields that stretched into oblivion. The wipers screamed against the glass, barely keeping up with the rain. My radio crackled, spitting static, before dying altogether. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white, the isolation pressing in. I'd driven rural routes before, but this was different. It was like the world had been erased, leaving only me, my car, and the storm. I kept glancing at the app, the pinpoint blinking like a warning. Who would be out here in this weather at this hour? My mind spun scenarios. A stranded motorist, a lost hiker, a prank. But none felt right. When I reached the location, my headlights swept over a desolate intersection. No houses, no lights, just a rusted stop sign leaning like a drunk. I confirmed my arrival on the app and waited the engine idling. The rain a relentless roar. I scanned the darkness, expecting to see someone waving, but the fields were empty, the trees swaying like mourners. My phone buzzed a text from the rider. Here, it said, no details, no name. I frowned, typing back, "Where exactly?" No reply. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield, my breath fogging the glass. That's when I saw him. Not in front of me, not where he should have been, but in my side mirror, a figure emerging from the blackness behind my car. My heart lurched. I hadn't seen him approach, hadn't heard footsteps over the rain. He was just there. A tall, drenched silhouette in a hooded jacket, his face obscured. The back door opened, and he slid into the middle seat, water pooling around him. The air in the car changed, grew heavier, like I'd invited something in I couldn't uninvite. "You order the Uber," I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He didn't look up, just nodded, muttering my first name in a low, rough voice. That was enough to confirm he was my passenger, but it didn't ease the knot in my chest. I shifted into drive, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. His hood was up, his face shadowed, but his eyes glinted, catching the dashboard's glow. He sat rigid, hands in his lap, water dripping from his sleeves. Something about him was off. Not just wet, not just tired, but wrong. Like he didn't belong in this world. We drove in silence. The rain a curtain around us. I tried to focus on the road, but my eyes kept flicking to the mirror. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but his presence filled the car, a weight I couldn't shake. I thought about asking where he was headed, what he was doing out here, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I turned on the radio, hoping music would break the tension. Static hissed, then a faint voice, a preacher mid-sermon, talking about judgment. I switched it off, the silence worse, now thicker. Years ago, I'd driven my sister home from a party, her drunk laughter filling the car as we sped through a quiet town. A deer had darted across the road, and I'd swerved, nearly crashing. she'd screamed, then laughed. But I'd felt it, the fragility of control, how fast things could go wrong. That night came back to me now, the same sense of something barreling toward me, unstoppable. 10 minutes into the drive, I couldn't take it anymore. "So, what brings you out here?" I asked, forcing a casual tone. "Pretty rough night for it." I glanced at him in the mirror. His eyes flicked away, avoiding mine, and for a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, nothing. Just silence, heavy and deliberate. My skin prickled. I tried again. "You live out this way." He shifted his hands, twitching in his lap. "Just keep driving," he said, his voice low-edged with something I couldn't place. Anger, maybe, or something darker. My stomach twisted. I nodded my eyes back on the road, but my mind raced. Who was he? Why was he out here in the middle of nowhere, with no bag, no explanation? The app showed his destination as another rural address, but it felt like a lie, like he wasn't going anywhere at all. The road grew narrower, the fields giving way to dense woods. The trees loomed their branches, clawing at the sky, and the rain seemed to thicken each drop a hammer against the car. I felt trapped, not just by the storm, but by him, by the way he sat, so still, so watchful. I glanced at the mirror again, and this time he was looking at me. Not just looking, staring, his eyes unblinking, like he was studying me, measuring me. My hands tightened on the wheel, sweat beading on my neck despite the cold. "Drop me off here," he said, suddenly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. I blinked, confused. We were nowhere miles from his listed drop-off, surrounded by woods with no houses, no lights. "Here?" I asked, slowing the car. "You sure? Drop me off," he repeated louder, a command that left no room for argument. My heart pounded. I wanted him out, wanted this ride over, but something about stopping here in this void felt like stepping into a trap. I pulled over the tires, crunching on gravel, and waited. He didn't move at first, just sat there, his eyes locked on mine in the mirror. Then slowly, he reached for the door handle. That's when I saw it. My phone glowing on the center console, the Uber app open with his profile visible. His name, his ride history, all there tying him to this moment. He froze his hand on the door, his eyes flicking to the screen. I don't know why, but I knew what he was thinking. He'd realized I had his information, that whatever he was planning, whatever he was, could be traced back to him. My mouth went dry. I forced a smile, my voice shaking. "Don't worry, I'll cancel the ride. No charge." He didn't respond. His eyes narrowed cold and unreadable. And for a moment, I thought he wouldn't leave. I thought he'd lunge, that I'd feel his hands around my throat, that this was it. But then he opened the door, stepped into the storm, and vanished into the fog. The rain swallowed him, leaving nothing but the echo of the door closing. I didn't wait. I floored the gas, the car lurching forward, my breath ragged. The road blurred the trees, a smear of shadow, but I didn't care. I needed distance, needed light, needed people. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel, my mind replaying his eyes, his voice, the way he'd appeared from nowhere. I reported him to the police as soon as I reached a gas station, my voice trembling as I told them about the ride, the way he'd acted, the fear that still clung to me like damp clothes. Days later, they called. A woman had gone missing that night, last seen near the forest where I'd picked him up. They needed more details, anything I could remember. I told them everything. His silence, his stare, the way he'd vanished. They searched, but the storm had washed away any tracks, any proof. The man was gone, and so was she. I was the last to see him, maybe the only one who'd gotten away. I don't drive for Uber anymore. I can't. Not after that night. Not after knowing what I'd carried in my back seat. I avoid rural roads, now stick to cities, to crowds. But sometimes, when it rains, I see him in my rearview mirror, a shadow in the middle seat, his eyes glinting, watching. I blink, and he's gone. But the fear stays a passenger. I can't drop off. Every storm brings him back. Every empty road feels like his. And every time I look in the mirror, I wonder if he's still out there, waiting for the next ride. The street outside our new house was a silent river of asphalt, its stillness broken only by the hum of my video game and the flicker of the TV screen. I was 10 alone in the dark, the world asleep around me. Then, from the void beyond the window, they came 2 black SUVs, their engines a low growl, their headlights slicing through the night like knives. What followed changed me. A child's courage pitted against shadows that still haunt my dreams. Moving to the new house felt like an adventure at first. It wasn't brand new, its walls bearing the faint scars of previous lives, but it was bigger, brighter than our old place. The neighborhood was a grid of tidy lawns and matching mailboxes, each house a mirror of the next. My parents loved it, the extra space, the quiet street, the chance to start fresh. My older sister, always lost in her books, barely noticed the change. But for me, a 10-year-old with a head full of stories, it was a kingdom to explore. I kept my friends from school, their houses just a bike ride away, and the familiarity of the city wrapped around me like a blanket. Life was good, simple until that night. It was one of our first nights in the house, the boxes still unpacked, the rooms half furnished. My parents had gone to bed hours ago, their door closed against the world. My sister was upstairs, probably dreaming of her novels. I was in the living room, sprawled on the carpet, the TV casting a blue glow across the walls. The game I played was an old favorite, its pixelated heroes battling monsters I could control. The volume was low, a whisper, to avoid waking anyone. But the house was so quiet, I could hear my own breathing. Outside, the street was a void, the street lights painting faint halos on the pavement. I planned to go to bed soon, but the game held me captive, each level a small victory against the night. Then a sound broke through a low rumble, like distant thunder. I paused the game, my thumb frozen on the controller, and tilted my head. Cars. At this hour, the street was always dead after dark, the neighbors tucked into their routines. I crept to the window, my knees brushing the carpet, and peeked through the blinds. 2 black SUVs rolled slowly down the road. Their headlights dim their engines, a predatory purr. They stopped right in front of our house, their bulk blocking the street lights' glow. My stomach twisted. Why here? I sank lower, my body half hidden by the couch, my eyes glued to the scene outside. The doors opened, and figures emerged, 5 or 6 men, their shapes blurred by the dark. They wore hoodies, the fabric swallowing their faces, and dark clothes that seemed to drink the light. No masks, but their movements were deliberate, practiced like wolves circling a herd. The drivers stayed in the cars, their silhouettes unmoving, while the others split up. 2 headed toward our neighbor's house, their steps silent on the grass. 2 more turned toward ours, crossing the lawn with a confidence that made my heart hammer. They're coming here. I ducked my breath, shallow, my hands trembling as I clutched the controller like a talisman. I heard them before I saw them. Footsteps heavy and measured approaching the front door. The porch creaked under their weight, and I pressed myself against the wall, my eyes darting to the door. The knob turned a slow metallic scrape, but the lock held firm. Relief surged through me, but it was fleeting. What do they want? My mind raced, conjuring images from the news burglars' worse. I was just a kid, powerless alone in a house that suddenly felt too big, too exposed. I didn't dare call out to my parents. Any sound might draw the men's attention. I stayed frozen, my breath hitching, waiting for the silence to break. For what felt like forever, nothing happened. Just the hum of the SUVs outside their engines, idling like a threat. I counted seconds in my head, each one a battle against panic. Are they still there? Curiosity clawed at me, fear warring with the need to know. I inched toward the window, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. Peeking through the blinds, I saw them, 2 men standing on the porch, their faces hidden in shadow. They weren't moving, just standing, as if waiting for something or someone. My mouth went dry. What are they doing? Then a memory surfaced unbidden. A week before we moved, I'd overheard my dad talking to a friend at the hardware store. They'd been laughing, but my dad's voice had an edge when he mentioned the old neighborhood. Some guys were poking around, he'd said, asking about houses for sale. Felt off. I hadn't thought much of it then, just adult talk, but now it loomed large. Were these the same guys? Had they followed us, tracked us to this new place? The idea was absurd, but it rooted itself in my mind, a seed of dread sprouting fast. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the game, its heroes defying impossible odds. Maybe it was the thought of my family asleep and unaware. But I stood my legs shaky and moved toward the door. My hand hovered over the light switch, the one that controlled the porch lamp. Turn it on. A voice in my head urged. Make them see you're not afraid. It was a lie. I was terrified, but I flipped the switch. The porch blazed with light, harsh and unforgiving, spilling over the men like a spotlight. I held my breath, expecting them to charge to shatter the door. Instead, they turned. Their movements were swift, almost mechanical, as they stepped off the porch and retreated across the lawn. I scrambled back to the window, my heart in my throat, and watched as they rejoined the others. The men from the neighbor's yard appeared jogging back to the SUVs, their shapes dissolving into the vehicle's dark interiors. Doors closed, engines roared, and the SUVs peeled away their taillights, vanishing down the street. I stood there, my hands pressed against the glass, my body trembling with a mix of triumph and fear. I did it. I scared them off. I didn't sleep much that night. I stayed by the window, watching the empty street, half expecting the SUVs to return. The house felt different now, its walls less solid, its silence heavier. When morning came, I told my parents, my voice tumbling over itself as I recounted every detail. They listened, but their faces showed more amusement than alarm. Probably just kids pulling a prank, my dad said, sipping his coffee. Or maybe they got the wrong house, my mom added. Her smile meant to reassure. But I knew better. I'd seen those men, felt the weight of their intent. They weren't kids, and they weren't lost. Years later, I learned something that chilled me. A house down the street had been burgled a month after we moved in. The police said it was a crew organized targeting new families who hadn't yet installed alarms. They'd case houses at night, testing doors, watching for signs of life. I never told my parents they'd moved on the incident, a footnote in our family's story. But for me, it was a wound, a moment, when the world revealed its darker edges. I still see those SUVs in my dreams, their headlights cutting through the night, and I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't turned on that light. There's another memory, one I've never shared. The day we moved in, an old man from across the street stopped by with a plate of cookies. He was kind, his eyes crinkled with age, but his words stuck with me. "This is a quiet place," he'd said, glancing at the street. "But keep your doors locked. You never know who's watching." I'd nodded, thinking he was just being neighborly. But that night, his warning echoed a whisper from a man who'd seen more than he let on. Was he talking about those men? Did he know something about our street, our house? I'll never know. But his words became a talisman, a reminder to trust the fear that lives in a child's heart. The house is still there, though we moved away years ago. I drive by sometimes, my eyes lingering on the porch, the window where I hid. The street looks the same, but it feels different, heavier, as if it holds secrets I'll never unravel. Some nights, the shadows come, and no light can keep them at bay. I'm older now, but part of me is still that 10-year-old, clutching a controller, staring into the dark, waiting for the world to show its true face. The face wasn't belong here, grinning through the glass, like it had crawled out of a fever dream. It was midnight, and my shift at the convenience store was dragging on each minute heavier than the last. The neon sign outside buzzed faintly, bathing the empty parking lot in a sickly red glow. I was alone behind the counter, surrounded by rows of candy and cigarettes, the air stale with the hum of the fridge. Then I saw it through the large windows, a figure standing just beyond the light's reach, wearing a clown mask with a painted smile that seemed to writhe in the shadows. My breath caught. Who would wear that here in the dead of night? The store was a concrete island off a quiet road, flanked by empty lots and a shuttered gas station. I'd been working the night shift for months, 10:00 p.m. to 3:00 a.m., because it was easy money for little effort. Customers were rare after 11 hours, leaving me with just the hum of fluorescent lights and a small TV playing infomercials to keep me sane. I liked the solitude, or at least I thought I did. But tonight, the silence felt different. Not peaceful, but watchful. Like the store was waiting for something to slip inside. I was restocking chips when the door chime didn't rang, a soft sound that made my head snap up. No one was there. The glass doors were still locked tight, but that figure was still there, standing across the street, now by the edge of the sidewalk, the clown mask catching glints of neon. I squinted my hands, clammy on the bag, trying to make out details. He was tall, dressed in a dark hoodie, his posture unnaturally stiff, like a puppet held by invisible strings. I told myself it was a prank, some kid messing around, but the mask's grin seemed too wide, too knowing, like it saw something in me I didn't. I turned away, focusing on the shelves, but my eyes kept darting to the windows. He's still there. The figure hadn't moved, just stood staring the mask, a pale smudge against the darkness. My heart was pounding now, a steady drumbeat in my chest. I grabbed the phone from under the counter, my thumb hovering over the keypad. But what would I say? There's a guy in a clown mask outside. It sounded ridiculous, but the air in the store felt heavier, like it was pressing down on me. I walked to the glass doors, keeping my distance, and peered out. The figure raised a hand, slow and deliberate, and pointed at me. Not waved, not beckoned, pointed, like he was marking me. He knows I'm alone. I backed away, my breath shallow, and busied myself with cleaning the counter, wiping the same spot over and over. The TV droned on, but its chatter felt hollow, unable to fill the growing void in the room. I kept glancing outside, and after what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, he was gone. The sidewalk was empty, the neon signs glow, unmarred by shadows. I exhaled, my shoulders sagging, but the relief was thin, like a cracked window, letting in a draft. I finished my tasks, restocking, sweeping, counting the register, moving faster now, eager to lock up and leave. But the store didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for him to return. At 3:00 a.m., I flipped the closed sign, locked the doors, and stepped into the night. The air was cool, heavy, with the scent of asphalt and distant rain. My car was parked behind the store, a beat-up sedan that rattled in the cold. I scanned the street as I walked, my keys jangling in my hand, but it was deserted. No cars, no people, just the faint hum of a distant highway. Then I saw him. Across the street, under a flickering street light, the clown mask glowed. He was walking now, slow and deliberate, his head turned toward me. The mask's grin seemed wider in the dim light, its eyes black hollows that swallowed the glow. My stomach dropped. I quickened my pace, my breath fogging in the air, and reached my car. I glanced back. He was still there, still watching, but he didn't follow. I fumbled with the keys, slid inside, and locked the doors, my heart hammering. He's just a creep. Just a creep. I drove home, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds, but no one followed. The next night, I was back at the store, the memory of the clown mask lingering like a bad dream. I told myself it was over a one-time thing, but my hands shook as I unlocked the doors. The shift started quietly. No customers, no sounds, just the usual hum of the fridge and the TV's low murmur. I kept the phone close my eyes, flicking to the windows every few minutes. Around 1 a.m., a man came in, not wearing a mask, just a guy in a jacket looking for snacks. He lingered longer than usual, browsing the aisles, and I watched him closely, wondering if it was him, if the mask was tucked in his pocket. He left without buying anything, and I exhaled, but the unease stayed a weight on my chest. What if he comes back? The rest of the shift passed without incident, but as I locked up at 3:00 a.m., my eyes scanned the street. No clown mask, no figure under the streetlight. I walked to my car, my steps quick, my keys ready. I opened the driver's door, slid inside, and froze. On the passenger seat was the clown mask, the same one, white plastic, red, painted grin, black eye holes staring blankly. My heart stopped. I hadn't left the car unlocked. I was sure of it. I'd checked the doors, the windows, everything. I grabbed the mask, my hands trembling, and threw it out the window, its grin flashing in the street light as it hit the ground. I started the engine and sped away, my breath ragged, my mind racing. How did it get there? How did he get in? I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? A clown mask in my car, appearing like it had a life of its own. I went back to work the next night because I needed the money. But the store felt different now, like it was part of the game. Every customer was a suspect, every shadow a threat. I kept the mask's image in my mind. Its grin burned into my memory, and I wondered if he was watching, waiting for me to slip. I started parking closer to the store, checking my car before getting in, locking it twice. But the fear didn't fade. It grew a shadow that followed me home, that lingered in the corners of my apartment. Weeks passed, and he never returned. No mask, no figure, no pointed finger. But I never forgot. I quit the job a month later, moved to a new town, tried to leave it behind. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I see it, that grin, those empty eyes staring from the dark. And I wonder if he's still out there, waiting for another store, another shift, another me to point it, to mark, to haunt with that silent, smiling mask.